All right, welcome everyone to another episode of the Jake Dunlap Show. We are very excited that you joined us. If you haven't tuned in, this is the show where we talk to celebrities, thought, and industry leaders to really discover their journey to success. I am super excited that you're joining us. This show is like no other. I can promise you that. You might laugh, you might cry, but you will definitely leave inspired and gain a whole new level of insight into those people that you follow, love, and admire. All right, welcome everyone to another episode of the Jake Dunlap Show. I am super excited for today's guest. This gentleman isn't just a battle-hardened Special Forces soldier. He's also passionate about empowering his fellow veterans after their life in the military. He served in Korea and led his troops with great distinction in Iraq and many other places all over the globe. He's won 3 Bronze Stars. After a decades-long career in the military, he founded his organization, which works with Medal of Honor awardees, U.S. Rangers, Navy SEALs, and many other veterans and their families to help them find purpose again. So I want you to please join me in welcoming Green Beret, best-selling author, founder of Warrior Rising and Mission 60, and an all-around good dude, Jason Van Camp. Jason, thank you so much for joining me.
Jake, thanks for having me. The last line that you said, all around good dude, that was my favorite line. So that's all I want to be known for.
That's kind of it, right? We get so focused on, how much money your bank account has or, your flex or what you look like. And the reality is it's kind of the goal, right?
Oh, yeah.
Known as a good dude. So we talked about this a little bit. What we focus on here in the show is really helping to tell the story of how people, arrived at the points that we all know them now. And so I'm really excited to help tell, kind of walk through your story. Pretty awesome. There's just a lot going on. So I think it's going to be great for our listeners, again, who really enjoy hearing those paths to success and definitely can relate. So we're going to go back in time. So we're going to go back to D.C. So born in Washington, D.C., but then moved to Springfield, Virginia. How old were you when you moved originally?
Oh, the thing was my parents had just bought a house in Springfield in this new, neighborhood, new location, right on the edge of the woods and a lake. But my mother was working in Washington, D.C. at the time. And so she was working, I guess, when she was like 9 months pregnant, and she went into labor, and they took her to George Washington University Hospital, which since has been demolished and then rebuilt. But that's where I was born, man, at George Washington in Washington, D.C., man. So I've always considered myself a son of Washington, which I've been proud of.
There you go. So what was like, so again, you mentioned lake, forest, etc. So what was life like growing up in Springfield? I know, what were those kind of early years like for you?
We lived in a neighborhood with a lot of kids. And so it was sort of that 80s iconic kids riding their bikes all up and down the street. Doors weren't unlocked. The parents weren't worried about, pedophiles or predators or anything like that, which they probably should have been worried about at the time, because now with all this information coming out, like I've got 2 small kids. I'm terrified to let them out of my sight, even in the backyard. You know what I mean? And so we lived in a time when kids, we would ride our bikes up the street, play, capture the flag till it was dark outside, ran home and had dinner. And then there was a lake literally across the street. We'd go there and go fishing all the time, or, just get muddy and just play war games. And, it was just awesome.
Were there a lot of military families or other families there as well too?
That's what you find in the Washington, D.C. area, in the DMV, especially in Northern Virginia. My dad was in the Army. He was in the Signal Corps during Vietnam. He got out and became a civilian, right? So he still worked as a contractor for he worked at the Pentagon. And I asked him when I was young, like, what do you do? And it was something we had to figure out for a school project when I was in first grade or something. And my dad was like, I work for the government. And I was like, well, what do you do in the government? He says, I work with computers. And I said, well, what do you do with the computers? He said, that's all I'm going to tell you. And I was kind of like, well, what am I going to say? I go to school. My dad's going to sound like the most boring guy ever. And so you go to school, and we had like this presentation. I was like, my dad works for the government. And all the other kids, like half the kids in the class were like, yeah, my dad works for the government. And that was it. That was it. They couldn't talk about it, you know? It was either that or they had their dads in the military. Some of them had their moms in the military as well. And so you grew up around that, and you grew up around the idea of knowing about being patriotic, about serving your country, you know, and a lot of kids, when they're around parents like that, they think, oh, I'm going to grow up and do the exact same thing. I didn't necessarily think, oh, I'm going to be in the military when I grew up, but I had a deep appreciation for the military. I was deeply patriotic, and there was one of two things that you learned growing up in the 80s in Washington, D.C. in that area. It's one, you know, we hate the Russians, and number two, we hate the Dallas Cowboys, you know, and that's kind of it, man.
Understood. Yeah, and it's going to be interesting. We'll fast forward to then you end up going to Russia too, which I think is also fascinating, right? It's kind of funny how that works. So, I mean, what are some things that stand out? I mean, it sounds like it was, you know, again, it's like this group of people or their parents or, you know, they kind of, then it might probably don't work together, but they all kind of have the similar types of experience. You know, there's some memories that stand out about whether it's, you know, working, you know, interactions with your parents or, you know, some lessons from that time that you kind of look back about. Again, like you said, it's probably a lot of those kids you're playing with, they end up going to the military or some other form of service. You know, some things that you remember from that early adolescence, you know, before you get into high school that, you know, you kind of have referenced back over the years of, you know, whether it's experiences with friends or family that help to kind of shape some of the things that you're doing now.
A lot of it had to do with playing sports. You know, it was an area where there was a lot of competitive sports, and my parents wanted me to play as many sports as I possibly could. You know, I started out playing soccer. I was in ballet for a few seasons.
We got to find videos of that, man.
Yeah,
are there videos or pictures that exist of this?
It was funny because my dad read an article about some of the Washington Redskins players doing ballet for balance and things like that. So he wanted me to do it. But then I was also in taekwondo and basketball and lacrosse and track and field. And for a time, I was in baseball. I love baseball, but I was the worst baseball player ever, man. I couldn't hit anything.
That's how I was. I was very simifor
I took a lot of walks, you know. Either I walked or I swung and missed. I always went for the home run, man. I never hit that damn ball. But I love baseball. I'm a huge Nats fan, and my cousin actually was really good at baseball. He's pitching in the majors right now for the Dodgers. Wow. Yeah, so I'm not sure if it ran in the family or anything like that, but it was just something that I need to do a lot more work on.
Yeah, I wonder if what was I going to say? I wonder if they did the Dodgers, did they win today? Weren't they playing in the wild card today?
I think they play tonight. They play St. Louis.
It's tonight. Yeah, you're tonight. So all of you in the future already know what's happened. Yeah, for me in baseball when I was a kid, I was small when I was like early, like growing up until high school. And like there was one game I got hit 3 times. And that's how I got on base. I'd be like, ugh. And then I take the hit. I could play the field. But like, yeah, I was not very good. So I can relate. So you're playing a lot of sports. You've got this kind of like sounds like very tight knit group. And then you go to West Springfield High, 95 to 2001. Does that sound right?
No, 91 to 95. So I graduated
91
to
95. Yeah. I had the one in the wrong place. So 91 to 95. So what was high school like? So this is like early 90s. You're in high school in Virginia, like maybe now kind of like end of the mullet. You probably I don't think there's like that's starting to like go out of maybe a little bit, maybe still a little bit. There's a lot of that going on.
I think I overstayed the mullet welcome, meaning I had the mullet for a little bit longer than it was in style. So I definitely had a mullet my freshman year, and the Redskins, the Washington football team, won the Super Bowl. So that was a big thing for my community. And then my sophomore year, there was an opportunity for some sophomores to make the varsity football team. And it was kind of a big deal to make the varsity squad as a sophomore. And I made it along with, I think, one other guy. And I actually started that year as a sophomore at linebacker, which is a big deal. And as part of the initiation process in high school, they shaved my head, so they shaved my mullet off. So I had a shaved head when I was a sophomore for the football season.
No, man.
That was the last of the mullet. It never grew back. That was it.
You didn't bring it back? There was never a time?
Never brought it back.
No.
Never. I started had that mohawk, that mohawk.
Like a Brian Bosworth type thing.
No, more like lately. It's sort of like short on the sides and long, and it kind of comes down the back. Yeah.
Oh, it's coming back.
I had that a little bit a couple of years ago.
That's all right.
I didn't mind it.
That was the look, man.
My wife didn't like it so much though. So
she finally made you get rid of it. That's kind of how it works.
Yeah.
So all right. So high school, playing lots of sports, or football obviously is where you're excelling. Again, it's kind of similar question. What are some things in high school? You obviously would go on to play football at West Point too. What are some key memories you have there? What are some things that stand out for you around again, experiences, or maybe things that are happening with your family from that era?
My family, I love them so much. I love them, to the ends of the earth. We experienced a lot of health issues in my family. When I was a freshman in high school, I was working out a lot. I was going to the gym a lot. And it was crazy because apparently my muscles were growing faster than my bones, my body. And the reason I say this is because during the last week of school in preparation for football the next year, we did running and sprints, and the coaches would take your time and everything. And I was running a 40-yard dash, and I felt something pop in my hip, and I fell to the ground, and my muscle had pulled out part of my hip. And so my hip had cracked, and it was kind of in, the bone was in my thigh. And so all during that summer, I just laid in bed the entire summer. And my father, leading up to high school, he had a very severe heart attack. He had a brain aneurysm. Mother had terminal lung cancer. And so that was a situation where, we had to appreciate every day, every moment together, and be there for each other and help each other out. And so my parents, a lot of kids think, oh, I'm embarrassed because my parents, they don't want to drive me to the mall or whatever. And, I always thought my parents were pretty cool. I always admired them because they overcame a lot of adversity, and they never complained about it, and they put all of their effort and their time into their kids, into making sure that they were happy. They got everything that they needed. They were supported. And then above all else, that they knew they were loved. And so those are lessons that have been instilled in me and that I want to, take with me as a father for my kids too, and I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, man. Well, that's awesome. I mean, that you got a chance to, experience that, and you had that, I guess not a lot, sometimes in high school, right. Or in military families, it's a little different, right? Sometimes it's a little colder at times, or a different experience. So, it's amazing that you got to experience that. And then, I know that then you went on to West Point. Did your mother pass away at some point around then, or was that later?
Yeah. I went to my freshman year at West Point, and then I knew I was going to serve a mission for my church. When you grow up in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints community, it's kind of ingrained in you that you should go on a mission, a 2-year mission. And then you get excited about it because you could get called anywhere. And from a young age, I made the decision, and I knew I was going on a mission. And so when I was recruited by Army, by West Point, I told them, I said, hey, at some point I want to serve a mission. And they said, okay, that's no problem. We've actually had a couple people serve missions before. And so I went a year, freshman year at West Point. I played in some of the games as a true freshman. I just wasn't physically ready for that. I played some special teams. I
bet.
Man, it's just like, for me,
what was that leap like? I mean, I know we're going to get into some more, some deeper, but what was that leap like for you? It's funny. I had Dave Meltzer on the podcast a few weeks ago, and he also played football. And he said his very first play running on special teams, he got ran over by Christian Okoye, of all people.
Oh my
and
gosh.
That's when he realized he was not playing in the NFL. He's like, if this guy's playing D3 football, he's like, I can't imagine what it's going to be like at that level. So do you remember what it was like your first game, or when you realize like, oh man, I'm not at this level?
When the Nigerian nightmare runs you over, you're not playing in the NFL.
That's right.
My experience was weird because I was kind of like, I felt like I was the golden boy, the heavily recruited athlete at West Point. And so I was pushed really hard as a true freshman and given a lot of opportunities that others weren't. I was like number 2 on the depth chart coming right into, the first training camp. And I wanted to feel like I earned this. I worked hard to get it. And I was never in a position before in my life where somebody just gave me something like that. And it was weird and it was uncomfortable. And I didn't like it. And then on top of that, we had just gone through Beast Barracks where it was straight military, out in the field, living in the woods, like running around every morning, doing the military thing to, okay, now you're in football 2-a-days immediately. And I remember weighing in the first day, and I was close to 200 pounds in high school, linebacker, which is a very undersized linebacker, which is why I got recruited by West Point. And I remember weighing in the first day of football, and I was 178 pounds. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to be a linebacker playing at 178. Eventually I'll get my weight back up. I'll get strong again. I'll feel good again. The coaches didn't have time for that, man. They put me in right away. And I was just getting my ass kicked, man. I mean, it was like spinning around. They're trying to learn the defense. I didn't even know the defense. I was asking questions. I was, when you don't know what you're doing, you're in a tough spot, man. You just kind of hope and pray. And so I was just trying to get lined up right, let alone like make the tackle,
Right.
And so the first game of the season I played, and I didn't play bad at all. And I almost had a sack, almost had a pick, I had a pass breakup, I had a couple tackles. And that was pretty cool. It was a pretty cool experience. We weren't playing a powerhouse or anything. We were playing Lehigh University. We won 42-10. And it was a cool experience, man, that first game. And then after my sophomore year, our sophomore season as a football team, we were pretty good. We were 10-2. We went to a bowl game. And then after that, I left to go on a mission to Russia. And so I went to Russia, St. Petersburg, Russia, in that area.
How'd you pick that? Like, how did you pick Russia out of because I know part of it is, you get at least a input there, but why Russia?
It's a luck of the draw, man. I had absolutely zero input whatsoever. You submit your packet to our church, and then a few months later, they send you a letter in the mail, and it says, congratulations, you have been called to serve in the X mission. And mine said St. Petersburg, Russia mission. And my parents actually opened it and read it to me over the phone. I didn't get a chance to read it myself. And I was excited to go. I was excited to leave West Point more than anything. I wanted to get the hell out of there.
Man, I mean, what was that like, man? 2 years, young guy. I mean, again, we're like, the Cold War ended, 7-8 years before that, but still, tensions aren't great. Like, what was that experience like? What are some things, again, here's a guy, again, you've kind of grown up in this area, a lot of your life. Did your family travel a lot? Did you do a lot of vacations, or is this like a first real, out in the wild?
My mother worked for Delta Airlines, so we traveled on flight passes around the country. But the only time I ever went outside the country was to the Bahamas when I was 12 years old.
Yeah.
So this was really the first time I ever went to a foreign country. And I remember landing, and we were all exhausted. It's a long flight, and I got there in March, and it was cold, I just remember thinking, man, this place is dirty, and we're kind of driving down the streets, and we see all these beautiful buildings. And I remember our driver was like, that's the Church of Atheism. And I remember thinking, man, they have a Church of Atheism here. That's insane. And pretty soon I learned to love the country and the people. I had a really hard time, as does 99% of the people, speaking the language. And so it took me a good year before I had a foundation. And then after that foundation was set, I took off and I got better every single week. I doubled my speaking ability, every single week. And by the end of my mission, I was pretty fluent, and I was pretty proud of that because it takes a lot of hard work. You got to get up early and study. You got to check your ego at the door and be okay with making mistakes and getting corrected and just bouncing back up. So it was super interesting. And especially when you read something in a foreign language, you can see how there's different perspectives on life and how people see things differently than you do.
Interesting. And
just really opened my mind, and I had an amazing time there.
And because it's just you and how many guys are there with you? How many people are you teamed up with? Well,
you team up with at least one person at a time, sometimes two people. So sometimes you're in a three partnership. Most of the time it's just you and another guy. And there's a lot of responsibility on your shoulders, man. You're a 19-year-old kid. You got to find a place to live. You got to pay rent. You got to pay utilities, and then you're outside the door, at 8:00 every morning out there talking to strangers about religion in Russia, communist Russia, where they don't, they're basically atheists under communism. And so you get used to a lot of rejection. You get used to understanding how to sell something effectively, sell yourself, be personable, have emotional intelligence. All that stuff and you learn it at such a young age, and it's so impactful, which is why you see a lot of Mormons, in the future doing pretty well with presenting or communicating or selling, in business, because they've learned it.
One of my top guys in Phoenix that ended up coming out to San Francisco with me. He was Mormon as well too. And there's also a work ethic too, right? This is what you're going to go do. Being in Russia, then any harrowing experiences? Are there any experiences that stand out to you as
oh yeah, every day was a harrowing experience, man. You get chased by people every now and again. You get door slammed in your face. You get into somebody's apartment where it's man, we got to get out of here. Two stories I'll tell you. One is I was arrested by the cops twice, and not for doing anything wrong, just for being an American, and trying to talk to a cop, and that was always pretty interesting. They put you in a jail cell, and then they'll, you give them your contact information. We have a lawyer that's on retainer. At least we did at the time. And they would call the lawyer, and eventually the lawyer would get you released. So That was interesting. And then when I was responsible for an entire city up north called Petrozavodsk. And it was a smallish town, and there were only 6 missionaries up there, and I was in charge. And it was when I was a little bit older as a missionary, and it was an amazing experience. And one day this sedan shows up outside my house, my apartment, right? And they're waiting for me, and we walk out, and they're like, get in. And my companion, my partner, he didn't speak Russian very well at all. So he had no idea what was going on.
Oh no.
And so I'm like, I'm on my own here, man. So I'm like, I could run away, I could yell, I could scream, or I could be just confident. And so I just owned the room, man, owned the area. I was confident. I'm like, open the door. And they opened the door. I got in, I owned the place, and they drove away with me. And it was a mafia sort of situation. And they take me to this boat on the lake, and they're like, they're thinking maybe they gotta grab me or handcuff me or push me on. I'm telling them to go. And so I'm like, let's go. I need to talk to your boss. And so we go, and I sit down with the boss, and he's like, you're not going anywhere. I'm like, listen, what can your organization do for me? My organization, I started telling him about my organization, his organization, how we can help each other out. And so instead of him trying to kidnap me for ransom or something like that, it turned out to be okay, we'll give you this, you give us this, and we'll make a deal. Now we're buddies. And so I'm negotiating with this guy in real time. And at the end of the conversation, we're like best buds. Like we give each other a hug, and I leave. And like my companion, he's just sitting there like, is it my turn to give the discussion? Like, should I bear my testimony right now? It's like, no, man, this isn't one of those meetings.
No. You gotta save that.
We're good, man. We're good. And so I don't think still to this day, he knew what was going on. And so these mafia guys, like they gave me protection. We gave them a bunch of printers and a bunch of stuff. And like, it was just a great deal that it's just all because you kept your cool, kept my head. I turned this disadvantage into an advantage, to an opportunity. And it was
where'd that come from? Where when you kind of look back, I mean, you're 20 basically at this time. Like, where did that come from? The ability to kind of be present, not your partner's like, okay, is this where we talk? Like where do you think that came from?
It's got to come from your upbringing, your foundation. Your parents. And that's what I would say. It came from me. My parents were cool. They never really lost their temper. And I remember somebody asking me once, like, have you ever seen your dad cry? And I was like, yeah, I think I remember two very specific times when I saw my dad cry. But then I was thinking, man, I never in my life have ever seen my mother cry. Like, my mother never cried. And I was like, man, that's pretty powerful. She was always very emotionally intelligent. She kept her cool no matter what the situation was. And you read books or you listen to podcasts or listen to things about people that also kept their cool. For example, Frank Abagnale, Jr. He's known as the con man, the guy from Catch Me If You Can. Right. Yeah. So when I was in Russia early on, there was a tape cassette. If you remember that, somebody had left it, a previous missionary had left it, and I picked it up. And it was Frank Abagnale giving a speech to the Air Force Academy. And he talked about his entire life, how he impersonated, an airline pilot, a lawyer, a doctor, an investor. He did all these things. And I was just mesmerized. And when you're a missionary, you can't really listen to certain music or read certain books or do anything. So there's not a lot you can do, but this tape was allowed. And so every day at lunch, I would listen to this tape. It was like 45 minutes. And I memorized this tape. And I was like, man, Frank Abagnale is so amazing. Like, I want to be confident like him. I want to, I want to be able to live a life that's full of adventure like him and everything else. And so just being cool, I learned from that experience, from that Frank Abagnale tape, as well. And later in life,
you channeled that in that meeting.
I did, man. Later in life, 5 years ago, I met Frank Abagnale and we gave a presentation together. And the guy was the coolest guy. Sometimes you meet your heroes or you meet celebrities and you're like, this guy's a total, this guy. Frank was so amazing. He was the nicest guy. We hung out. He invited me to his house. It was just the coolest thing ever. And I guess that's how I'd answer that, man. It's just life experiences. Cool, and
it was the right tape at the right time. You had it, and then you put it into motion.
Hell yeah!
And you channeled that. Like, oh gosh, I've got to be this person, which I think is interesting, right? I think like a lot of people, it's like it's putting into practice things that you learn. Obviously, yours is a little bit higher stakes than someone reading for a business or putting together planning, but. It goes back to, I think, a lot of people that they listen to podcasts, they read books, but do they actually do anything about it? And, you were kind of forced into it, but that's cool that it was kind of like right place, right time.
I tell people all the time, they want to be thought leaders or they want to be a guru or a wellness coach. I'm like, don't be a thought leader, be an action leader. Don't be a guru, be a do-ru. Get up and do something. Take action, move. Don't care what it is. Just do something about it. And I love that mindset, that action oriented mindset, because here's the deal. Like a lot of times when I go speak or when we go train, people, specifically like professional athletes will say, Jason, I want you to motivate me, man. Just motivate me. And I say, I can't motivate you. I'm not going to try. And they're kind of dumbfounded. They're like, well, what are you here to do then? And I say, the only person that can motivate you is yourself, because the only true motivation is self-motivation. I'm not going to be there 24/7. I can't wake you up in the morning. I'm not going to be your alarm clock. I can't hold your hand and walk you through all the things you need to do during the day. You need to do that yourself. Only thing I can do is I can inspire you. I can inspire you to motivate yourself so that you can take action, so that you can see results. And once you see results, you inspire yourself.
Yeah.
To get motivated, to take more action, to see more results. And so it's like this circle of inspiration, motivation, action, and results. And I just believe that. And it starts with doing something, taking one step. Truth.
And how do you, where, again, when you look back, and again, we'll jump into, you get back and then you go into Ranger School. But where did that come from? Again, like that ability, because I think a lot of times, people take a different approach where it's, they get into that position of authority or trust, and instead it becomes about advice, right? It becomes about, I'm going to give you this or that. Was this from your military experience? Was it from, again, like you talked about, like your upbringing? Like, where does that ability to be confident in that and confident in, helping people work through it? Because I at least for me, I feel like a lot of leaders don't do that. A lot of leaders that, they're really good at giving advice and having opinions versus, helping people to pull it out of themselves. Like, when you think back, like where does that seed come from?
I guess from my mother, she said, show me your friends and I'll show you your future. So I always tried to put myself around people that I wanted to emulate, that I wanted to be like.
How old was she? How old were you? Do you remember when she said that?
Oh gosh, probably going into my junior year, or I'm sorry, my junior high school stuff around that time.
Wow.
Because that's really when you start to develop and you start to, decide who you want to hang out with, what you want to accomplish. Goals that at one point maybe seemed insurmountable are now feasible, And so, what it breaks down to is, if you want the life of being a drug dealer, well, then hang around drug dealers and see what happens. If you want a life of playing video games and doing nothing, then hang out with guys that are doing that. If you want to be on the varsity team, if you want to be a captain, hang around the varsity guys. If you want to be a millionaire, hang around millionaires.
Yeah.
They'll all rub off on you, and you'll realize as you hang out with these guys that they're not that different from you. They're not that more special than you are. You can do the same thing. And when you're living in that unknown, you're fearful of doing something like that because you just don't know. And then once you're around people that are doing something, you know it.
Yeah, I can do that. I see what they're doing.
Pattern. You see the template. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that advice, man. I think it's great. And I think it's interesting how, again, from doing this podcast now for, the last 4 or 5 months, it's those weird moments that happen. And like you as a father, how old are your kids?
So I'm a young dad, even though I'm 44 years old, right? I got a 4-year-old daughter and a 2-year-old son.
Okay. All right. I'm 41 and have a 7 and a 3.
There you go. So we're sort of in the same boat. Okay.
Yeah. So I get it. It's, it's interesting, as a parent now to just think about, that's something you took with you for life, right? And you're bringing into your business now, and you took it through these various experiences, just the responsibility of what it actually means to be a parent,
When I think about being a parent, growing up, I really didn't know what fear is. I won't say I was fearless, but I would do stupid things, jump off tall things or, go crazy because I didn't understand the consequences. And my mother used to tell me also, like, wait till you have your own kids and you'll see what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And now that I have my own kids, I'm like, I understand what fear is. You know what I mean? Like when they do crazy things or when they're out and about, it's like, man, there's nothing more terrifying than them getting hurt or something happening. So you got to be
wait till they start school, man. Then
then
that's when it becomes, my son's only in first grade, but you start to see the like, wait, some kid said what? It's like, but you can't control it, and you can just like the things and the lessons we're talking about, you can arm them with this and, hope that they make the right decisions.
Well said.
But It's interesting, man. So, all right. So back to it. So go back to West Point, go into Ranger School. How did you choose that? Out of the different paths you could have, done coming out of West Point, what was it about, the Ranger School that really appealed to you? I mean, obviously too, and for some context for people too, did you make the decision? Was this before or after 9/11? Because I know it's like right around that time.
It was definitely after 9/11. And so I graduated in June of 2001 and went to my officer basic course, OBC, in July. And 9/11 hit in September of that year, obviously, and it changed everything for us. We were at one point, an Army that was training, that was getting evaluated based on your PT scores, your physical training scores, and how you do on certain exercises all that's unimportant now. What's important is we're going to war and we got to train up to go to war. And so there was a completely different shift. And I thought to myself, if I'm going to do this, if I'm going to go to combat, I'm going to be at the tip of the spear. I want to be at the front. And so we went to pre-Ranger training. At OBC, there's 100 guys that started, including my buddy, Andy, who convinced me to do it. We played football together, and he was like, I'm doing it, man. I was like, okay, if you're doing it, I got to do it. So that's my motivation. We'll do it together. It'll be fun, and we'll have the shared misery and everything else. And so first day, you had to report at like 4 a.m. at this field. 100 guys were there, pre-Ranger training. I was there. Andy was not there.
What?
So I was just like, where's this guy at? Like, what's going on? He didn't show up, and we just got our bags smoked, as we say in the military, for like 2 hours. Just crushed physically. And we finished up. I went back to the barracks because we were living in like a kind of hotel type area at the time, and I went to Andy's room and I banged on his door. He opened the door. He's in his boxers. He's got sleep crusted in his eyes, and he's just like, oh, man, 4 a.m. came so early, bro. I couldn't get up, man. Sorry. And he kind of just shut the door. And I'm just like, are you kidding me, man? Like, I already went to the first day. There's no way I can quit now. I guess I showed up. Like, I can't not go. And so I finished up our pre-Ranger training. We finished with 13 guys, pre-Ranger training out of the 100. So, 87 guys quit along the way, or got injured or whatever. Of the 13 guys that got selected to go to Ranger School, only 10 guys went to Ranger School. And of those 10 guys, I was one of only 3 that graduated.
Wow.
And so it was an amazing experience. It's very difficult. I'm proud of that experience. I had a blast at Ranger School. Not many people say that. I did. I thoroughly enjoyed my time there. Learned a lot. Became a man, I guess you could say, in a way. Grew up a lot in the military, in the ultimate military leadership course, Ranger School, and it was just awesome, man. You instill this creed in your daily life, in your mindset, and internalize it. It's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, I've known some different folks, and the experience I've heard is very similar. That it's just like that discipline is. I think it's like it's almost impossible to unlearn. Like, I'm sure many have, but it seems like it just sticks with you for forever.
Oh, no question. No question. There are many times when, you're out, even in training or in combat, where it's cold, it's miserable, life sucks, and you kind of look to your left sleeve where your Ranger tab is. And the joke in the military is, if you're cold, just rub your Ranger tab for warmth, And that's sort of a cool thing, because it's like it's reminding you that you went through hard things. You went through discomfort. You went through a tough situation, not just for a short period of time, but for months at a time. And you came out the other end successful, victorious. And so, rubbing that tab or looking over that tab gave me a lot of confidence to continue when things were tough, as well as, there's a 6-stanza Ranger creed that you memorize. And before you eat, you have to recite the entire creed verbatim without a mistake. And so doing that for months on end, you really have that thing memorized for life. And so there have been many times when life has been tough and I've recited that Ranger Creed in my mind to remind myself, like, I can get through hard times. I can do hard things. And this is who I am. This is the type of person I am. I'm never going to leave a man behind. I'm going to display the courage, the intentional courage required to fight on to the objective, though I be the lone survivor, like things like that. Like, no matter what, I'm going to get the job done. I'm never going to leave a guy behind. That sort of thing it's really powerful. The self-talk, that you have.
Yeah. And so you finish Ranger school, you go to Korea for a little bit, right? And you serve like near the demilitarized zone, which has got to be pretty wild, or just again, like another completely different experience. And then you're deployed to Iraq, right? You were part of the I guess for 101st Airborne, right?
Yeah. 101st Airborne Division. I was in the initial invasion of Iraq. I joined the guys as we were coming up, and then we landed in Mosul, or outside of Mosul, in a little town called Arabiya, which was on the Syrian border. And we took over that town, and we basically established a sort of a base there. We did a lot of commerce and train the police and things like that. At the time, the Iraq army kind of surrendered. They laid down their arms. They ran away. It wasn't much of a fight. And there weren't a whole lot of insurgent attacks, any terrorist attacks yet. I mean, we were driving around at that time with Humvees with the doors off. So it wasn't crazy yet, but just wait a year, and then it got crazy.
Yeah. What was that transition like? Because then I think like 2006, you start as a detachment commander. What were those years like in between? Again, where you were there in the very beginning to, really seeing just a, completely different scenario. It sounds like year over year. What were some of the, as you kind of think about that, and then again to where then you go into detachment commander, where I think you led close to 300 missions, across Iraqi and Kurdish lands, and training soldiers, etc. So, like, what were those first few years like? And again, because you can prep and be mentally there, but what are some things that stand out to you just from what changed over those first few years?
So after my first deployment, I went and tried out for the Special Forces. And over the next few years, I became a Green Beret, and I got my team, and we immediately deployed to Iraq for a rotation. And I was in the middle of Iraq, close to the Iranian border, and we were told to find a location, build a base, and take the fight to the enemy. That was basically it. It was the ultimate, SF mission, Special Forces mission. And my second day there, our convoy hit an IED, and two of my guys got injured significantly and had to leave the country. So I knew we were in for a fight, and it's a strange feeling knowing that whenever you leave the base, your compound, and you're driving down the street, there's a chance, that you could hit a roadside bomb, like at any point, that like this could be the end for you. And it's an interesting feeling knowing that that's the case every time you leave the fence, you get outside the wire. The location that we stayed at, it was getting mortared, nearly every single night from a little town, a little village across this river. And we talked to the Iraqi army that we were stationed with, that we sort of embedded with, and they wanted nothing to do with that village. They were not going over there under any circumstances, even though the mortars, the direct fire was hitting their side of the base as well. They were just like, we're good. They lost a couple guys, from it. They're like, no, we don't want to mess with that. Baffling to me. We talked to the police, and they're like, hell no, we're not going to go over there. And so I said, well, we need somebody to go over there. We need somebody brave. And it just so happened that the S2, the intelligence officer for the Iraqi army that we were sort of embedded with, he was a Kurd. and he spoke perfect English, spoke, Arabic and Kurdish and everything else. And he was like, Jason, the Iraqis aren't going to fight for you. The police aren't going to fight for you, but I know some people that will. And I said, well, tell me, who are they? And he said, my people, the Kurds. If you can somehow bring them down here, we will fight, and we will fight to the death. And I was like, man, I like what I'm hearing, but I don't know much about the Kurds. I've never worked with them before. So I started to read a lot of books about the Kurds. I talked to General Petraeus, through his channels about signing basically a waiver to allow the Kurds to come down past this demarcation line. And he agreed to it. And so next thing you know, I had 600 Kurds under my command, and we trained them up, and we went over to this village. And over there were 13 IEDs in the road. And the general of this Kurdish force, this Peshmerga force, and that's translated as to those who face death, man, he got out of his vehicle and he picked up every single one of those IEDs and he dismantled it himself. And I was like, man, this guy is trying hard to impress me. And guess what? He's impressing the hell out of me. So we go into this village, and the enemy, they see us coming, and so they leave. As was often their tactic. They see us coming, they leave, we leave, and they just come back in the village. But I employed a tactic that had never been really used before. Once we got to this village, I told this general, I said, hey, I want you and all your 600 guys to stay here and don't go anywhere. And he said, yes, sir. And we left, and the enemy saw us leave, and they started matriculating back into the village, and the Kurds just caught them one by one. And next thing you know, like, this village is secured. And then we had a foothold, and we just started taking the fight to the enemy. My last battle there, I had managed to bring down 4,000 Kurds. And it was like the coolest experience you'll ever have. I was in charge of these 4,000 guys. I felt like Julius Caesar, I'm standing in front of all these guys.
That's wild.
And they're all, they got RPGs, they got AKs. They're in like all sorts of makeshift vehicles. There's like a Porsche 911 that's like rotted out, rusted out. The top roof of the 911 is cut out. There's a dude standing in his AK on the passenger seat. There's all sorts of Toyota Hilux trucks. I'm like, let's go. And like, it was just cool, man. And so we took down this entire town. It was, we liberated this entire town. It was taken over by Al Qaeda, and my guys. It was like a two-day battle. Man, it was insane, and Kurds took the fight to the enemy. We completely liberated that city. It was a small city. I mean, it wasn't a village. There were buildings and the whole thing, and we took it over, man. And it was the best part of that deployment, because we had 4 Purple Hearts on my 12-man team. My engineer, Sergeant Rob, he expired. He got shot in the head on a mission in August. My team sergeant got shot through both of his legs, and he survived. We got him back to the States. My warrant officer, he was injured. No, let me take that back. So my communications officer and my weapons sergeant, both of them were injured. And then a couple guys had to leave country for various reasons. So it was a rough deployment, and it was really hard to transition back to the States after that.
Yeah, and that's. I mean, let's get into kind of what you're up to, what you've been up to. Before I do that, I do want to ask maybe a follow up. What did that moment, man? When I think about leadership, and I think about the different ways, like, what did that moment, you had 4,000 of these people that you've trained and are there, again, in their rusted out Porsches. Like, what did that teach you about leadership? And maybe you didn't realize it at the time, but, what are some things you look back and you're like, these are some things I learned from that experience in particular around, what it takes to lead and inspire.
One is you have to know what you're doing. Right. And I had a plan, and I knew that plan backwards and forwards, and I knew what everyone was supposed to be doing in that plan, and I was confident in it. Right. And that confidence would breed confidence, just like calm breeds calm, man. Next thing is you got to find out what people's motivations are. And so I went to a bunch of Kurds with my translator, And I was trying to get them excited and fired up. Hey, we're going after these terrorists. These terrorists are committing these atrocities in this city. This is what they're doing. And I was kind of met with blank stares by some of these Kurds. And I was like, don't you guys want to, go out there and administer justice and do the right thing? And they're like, we don't care about terrorists. And I was like, okay, what do you care about? And one of the guys said, are they Arabs? And I kind of looked at my translator. I'm like, yeah, they're Arabs. And I said, okay, we will kill the Arabs. I'm like, oh my God. Fair enough. All right, that's your motivation. You don't care about the terrorists. You just want to kill Arabs. All right, well, these terrorists are Arabs. So, ipso facto, let's go get them. You know what I mean? And so that's one thing that you think about is what are their motivations? When you really start working with the leadership, you got to find out what their values are, what they believe in, what they're made of. For me, I'll tell you that I'm all about determination, resourcefulness, and loyalty. So whenever I meet somebody who kind of embodies those values as well, like we become best friends. They get me and I get them. Like we're going to get the mission done no matter what. You don't have to give me a whole lot of guidance and I'm not going to ask you a lot of questions. I'm going to figure a way to get it done. And I'm going to be loyal to you to the end, no matter what. And if you're that way to me, then we can accomplish great things together. And I think, probably the last thing is, as far as this mission goes and what you learned about leadership, you have to trust other people to do their job. You can't micromanage. You can't be everywhere at once.
Yeah.
You have to say, all right, this is what I need you to do. I trust you. Go get it done. If you need any help, I'm here. Just communicate with me and let me know what's going on so I can pull levers for you, so I can make sure you're getting what you need. And that's it. And if you can give other people what they need, they're going to give you what you need back. And so I'll leave you with those 4 lessons.
I love that, man. And I think what you said too, it's like, and it's what they need, not what you think they need. And as you talk about that story, and understanding people's motivations, I think sometimes in leadership, people have a sense for what they think someone should be doing or need. And sometimes, look, there's a line between teaching and coaching and mentoring these things. But I think too often we're not focused enough on, again, giving them what they need versus what we think they need and versus what they think they need. And finding that balance. And so for you, let's fast forward, as we kind of like wrap up, and I feel like there's just so much you've done since then, but, talk a little bit about Mission 6.0, that transition, Warrior Rising. Obviously, everyone, make sure you go check out the book. I've got it right here, Deliberate Discomfort. I love the title too. And as you read the book, I think you'll kind of understand this mindset. And the interesting part is, when I look at people who grew up in the professional world, that the mindset on a totally different scale is similar. And so, talk about what you've been up to, what made you, start again, Mission 6.0, and, what you're excited about and, what gets you excited as you look forward to.
Great question. I appreciate the plug. Go to Amazon.com to get the book, or you can go to DeliberateDiscomfort.com and pick up the book. It's #1 Amazon bestseller. We're really proud of it. I think you're getting a lot of value out of it, specifically with leadership. It's all about getting comfortable being uncomfortable. And when I was getting ready to get out of the military, I went on my last mission to Mali, Africa, and I came down with a seizure disorder. Somehow, nobody really knows how or why, but I started having these epileptic seizures, and over the course of the next few years, they just never really went away. And so the military said, "Well, we need you to get out." And so I asked myself the same question all veterans ask themselves at some point: now what? What am I going to do? And you remember me telling you earlier about what my mother told me when I was younger: "Show me your friends, and I'll show you your future." A lot of my friends had gotten out of the military after 3 years, 5 years, and they had started businesses and they were successful. Some of them had already exited, at that point, and they had made a lot of money. And so I thought to myself, if they can start a business, so can I. What would I start a business in? What do I know about? Well, I spent the last 20 plus years, West Point, leadership, training, combat, leading soldiers, tip of the spear, 1% of the 1% sort of thing. And I was like, well, I could add value because I'm an expert in those things. I know more about that stuff than most people. Does anybody want this? And so I started cold calling NFL teams and one by one.
I love it
because I'm a fan of sports, man. And I finally alphabetically got to the New York Jets, and they said, we'll give you a chance to present to us, but you're not going to get a contract or anything. It'll be a good experience for you. And so I went up there to New York with two buddies of mine, a peer from West Point and a guy who was an NCO that kind of worked for me. And the three of us pitched to the New York Jets. And after the presentation was over, Rex Ryan, the head coach at the time, said, hey, congratulations, guys. You just landed your first ever contract, and your first ever client is the New York Jets. And so we didn't even know what we were doing. We didn't have like a curriculum or anything like that. We were just like, let's create it on the fly. And next thing you know, we've got this leadership development company. We're getting marketed on ESPN and the NFL Network. And it was just really cool, man. And so it's a leadership development company. We've got things have changed since COVID. We do a Deliberate Discomfort challenge. It's a 60-day challenge. It's for individuals or teams. We have workshops. We still do team building events from time to time. We do keynotes, and then you could get the book or the audio book or anything like that. And so that's Mission 6.0. And then Warrior Rising, because of the success of Mission 6.0, I created a nonprofit to help other veterans find their purpose again through business ownership. And so if you're a veteran or an immediate family member of a veteran that wants to start a business or wants to accelerate a business, come to Warrior Rising and we'll help you do exactly that. We're going to probably raise $2 million this year alone. We grow every single year. We're looking at helping 3,000 veterans this year start businesses. We're going to have probably 60 success stories this year. Business is tough and very rarely do you hit a home run right off the bat. So 60 guys we consider success stories of our organization this year. Hopefully by the end of the year, we're pretty close to it. And then we throw business showers 4 times a year in various locations where we give vets, custom business suits, laptop computers, headshot photos, marketing videos, and opportunity to pitch so that they can get funding. And everybody that comes to our business shower gets money. The grand prize winner is a $20,000 winner, and then everybody else gets, a lower number than that. So that's Warrior Rising. And if you want to learn more about that,
we'll link to all that in the show notes too. I mean, cool. I think for those of you, again, if you're looking for, the definition of leadership and individuals who can talk about leadership and under, some of the most extreme and, stress, yet, keep their cool and learn and again, all the qualitative details. I mean, I can't think of a better group to get to work with, your company or you as an individual.
Thank you. Appreciate that a lot.
Yeah, it's a great, I really do. I really encourage everyone to check out the book. I mean, I think, again, even if you're on the front lines, and again, you talk about your experience with the Rangers and reciting and, your own motivation, and making sure that you're, as humans, we don't just rely on a company to sit there and motivate us, to your point, right? It's not the company, your company and your own professional development and growth, they should helpfully support that, just like, but you also have to have that mental fortitude and that mindset to grow yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So what's next, man? What's the next thing we can expect, from you here, looking at 2022 right in the face here? You're doing so many amazing things. Like I said, everyone, please go check out the links. We'll put them in the show notes. What's next for you, man, as we wrap up?
Well, I appreciate it, brother. I'm trying, man. 2020.
I think you're doing more than trying, man. I think you're succeeding.
No, here's the deal. The rest of the year, we're doing a few things. One, we're going to do a business shower in Palm Springs on November 11th on Veterans Day. And it's going to be an online kind of victory for veterans fundraiser. Rob O'Neill, the guy that shot bin Laden, is going to be our guest speaker. And then December, our final business shower of the year is going to be in New York City to coincide with the Army-Navy football game. So anybody in Palm Springs or in New York City that wants to attend that event, come to warriorrising.org or just email me at jason@warriorrising.org. Next year for Mission 6.0, I'm hopefully going to finish my second book. It's sort of a trilogy. So Deliberate Discomfort is the first book. I'm learning about leadership. Second book is about going to combat, and third book is going to be about returning from combat, and then kind of what did we learn? Where do we go from here? The Deliberate Discomfort Challenge is going to go hard again on January 3rd, Monday, January 3rd. So just in time for your New Year's resolutions. You want to get after it to start the new year, go to challenge.deliberateDiscomfort.com. And we might have a couple new verticals next year. We're kind of working on that. Don't want to let anything out of the bag yet. So I'll let you know as that develops further.
I love it, man. I'm happy to promote it and, make sure everyone gets over and checks it out. So look, Jason, I appreciate you, man. This was a great, I think, inspirational story that, no matter where you're at in your life, whether you're, early in your career, maybe you're still in school, or you're, early in your career, you're professional, maybe, you're trying to find what's right for you. I think some of these lessons about, the control that you have on on how you approach situations and creating that discipline, creating the discipline is the hard part. Once you get in the routine, it's not that it's the easy part, but hopefully people can listen to this, go check out Warrior Rising and some of the other things you're up to, and really start to set down that path, for success. So again, Jason, really appreciate you, man.
Thanks, Jake. Appreciate you. Great show. Hopefully Awesome. People are entertained.
Oh, I think so, man. I'm not worried about that. And I appreciate everyone. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Jake Dunlap Show. We will see you next week.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in to another extremely fun and interesting episode. I thought it was fun and interesting, so I hope you did too, of the Jake Dunlap Show. Really great, just breaking down everything that makes people who they are, the success, the trials and errors, and I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I did. Make sure to subscribe on your favorite platform, and make sure, more than anything, to go over to jakedunlap.com. That's where you're going to stay up to date on all the latest guests, additional details, prep notes. We're going to be sharing everything on jakedunlap.com. So go ahead, go over there. You can subscribe there as well too, and we will see you next week on the Jake Dunlap Show.